We're going to be looking at Wild Swans at Coole in this lesson. It's a beautiful poem by William Butler Yeats. It is both a romantic and a modernist poem, and it really is worth studying in this module. So the inspiration for this lyric poem, William Butler Yeats was an Irish poet, and he was feeling quite melancholy around the time he wrote it, in probably around 1916 or 1917. And melancholy just basically means he was feeling a bit low, a little bit not very optimistic. And the reason he was feeling like that, we'll look into now. If we look at the diction of the poem, melancholy describes the tone, and here are some of the possible reasons for him feeling this way. He was reflecting on his advancing age, which is inevitable for all of us. We all watch ourselves age and die, and it's probably not something that you as young boys are thinking about at the moment, but it will become more and more something that you can relate to as you grow older. It was also dedicated to a British airman killed in World War I, Major Robert Gregory. He had been rebuffed by Morgan and her daughter, so that was also a reason for him feeling quite low. He had tried to court them. In other words, he wanted to have a romantic relationship and probably marry them, and that didn't go his way. And also there was the Irish rebellion against the British happening at the time. So he had quite a few reasons for feeling a bit down. I'm recording this obviously in 2021, and we've got a lot of reasons for feeling melancholy. Last week we had the terrible riots in KZN, and we've been dealing with COVID for the past year at least. And so we've also had a lot of reasons for feeling down. And melancholy. So this is a lovely word to describe the tone, and there are often tone questions in poetry papers, so you must get used to them. The poem itself reflects on the search for beauty, that beauty can be quite fleeting in today's world. Also, it's probably something that we don't always stop and notice, and so in this poem it's quite beautiful the way that he's obviously having this melancholy moment and notices the beauty around him. So let's take a look at the rhyme scheme as well while I read these stanzas. The trees are in their autumn beauty, the woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water among the stones are 59 swans. The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw before I had well finished all suddenly mount, and scatter wheeling in broken rings upon their clamorous wings. So we've got beauty, dry, water, sky, stones, swans, me, count, finished, mount, rings, wings. So the rhymes, so there definitely is some kind of rhyme scheme starting to emerge already. A, B, C, B, D, D. At the top you can see that, and you can fill that in on your copies of the poem. I have looked upon those brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I, hearing at twilight, the first time on the shore, the bell beat of their wings above my head, trod with a lighter tread. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold. Companionable streams or climb the air, their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest, wander where they will, attend upon them still. But now they drift on the still water, mysterious, beautiful. Among what rushes will they build? By what lake's edge or pool? Delight men's eyes when I awake, some day to find they've flown away. Okay, so something for you to think about. If you could please pick up your pens now and take a look at the poem in front of you and briefly try to outline the main points of the poem. So which images resonate with you and why? How is the poet's state of mind explored And for this, you might want to, again, think back to that melancholy tone word and look especially at the diction. So we often use swift to describe or to outline the various elements of poems. So swift is structure, word choice, imagery, figures of speech, tone, and theme. And so if we're looking at the poet's state of mind, we're thinking particularly about the diction, aren't we? We're looking at the word choice to try and help us decide, is he feeling happy? Is he feeling a bit downcast? Obviously, you know he's feeling a bit melancholy. We've already said that. So you need to take a look at the words specifically pointing to that. Is there a complete sense of hopelessness by the end of the poem? What do you think? Take a look at those last lines and explain why you think what you think. Is there anything else you notice? So please press pause now and just spend 5 minutes looking at these questions, thinking about them carefully. And if you need to, write swift down the side of your page so that as we go through the poem, you make sure that you don't miss anything. Okay, so you've finished doing that exercise. I'm going to go through the poem again, and you'll see along the side of my slide, I've included some notes. The poem begins with a reference to autumn. The trees are in their autumn beauty. The woodland paths are dry. And we're lucky at Michael House because we really do get to enjoy glorious autumns. And so if the trees are in their autumn beauty and one closes one's eyes and thinks about the autumn beauty here at Michael House, you can see the trees in their autumn beauty, the beautiful red leaves. In Western culture, autumn is often used as a metaphor for aging, as in the phrase, the autumn of our years. And I spoke to you when we looked at Ode to Autumn, Keats's poem, and I told you about another one of his poems which talks about seasons, the seasons of life, and how autumn is probably, probably where I am, or perhaps where I'm approaching. In my 40s, moving up into my 50s, I'm entering the autumn phase of my life, where you're probably in the spring of yours. And so one does become quite reflective when one's years are starting to slide by, and it seems to happen faster and faster. So this is what that's pointing towards, or what it's suggesting. So the first line is quite lyrical with a conventional reference to autumn beauty. The tone is uncertain. The reader doesn't know at this stage if the mood will be sad or contentedly peaceful. And then he says, under the October twilight, the water mirrors a still sky. For us, October is spring in the southern hemisphere. This would have been written in the northern hemisphere. And so this is autumn for the poet. Autumn going into soon winter. The tone is uncertain, the reader doesn't know. The mood of the poem is still peaceful and calm with a hint of melancholy, suitable for the subject of aging. And then there's a reference to the dry woodland paths, which is an appropriate reference to the dryness of aging skin, perhaps, in contrast to the moisture and the warm blood of youth. The reference to twilight is also appropriate, just as we're refer to autumn as a metaphor for aging. So afternoon and evening is also a similar reference. The stanza concludes with the introduction of 9 and 50 swans. Mirrors, so under the October twilight, the water mirrors a still sky. Again, if we think about walking around our dam at Michael House, as you walk past the dam on a beautiful autumn day, that surface can appear to be like a mirror, and it's a lovely image, isn't it? And on that, upon the brimming water among the stones, are 59 swans, which is interesting. It seems to be a somewhat mythic significance because, it's a very specific number, but also the archaic manner in which the number is expressed. Instead of just saying 59, he says 1 and 50. The critic Martin Pouvel remarks that any reader of the poem who has ever paid even fleeting attention to a flock of wild waterfowl can hardly avoid reflecting that the counting of such a large number of wild swans would be no mean feat. I mean, it must have taken him quite some time And also they're probably not still, so to count them would have been quite difficult. And this serves further to distance the poem from human reality. In seeking the origins of this rather arbitrary number, he recalls that 59 is the number of bells said to be on the horse of the Queen of Elfland in the Scottish ballad Thomas Rhymer. So he sees then the poem as a contrast between the fairy immortality and immutability of the swans and the more strictly linear nature of the aging poet. Yeah, so this is almost a magic number, this critic is suggesting. But it's also a prime number, which I want you to focus on more. It's magic in another sense, isn't it? Nothing else can divide into 59 besides 1 and 59. So that makes it a prime number. It gives it a kind of fixed inflexibility. It's also an odd number, which means that one of those swans does not have a mate, perhaps symbolizing the poet, because remember he was wooing two women, well, probably not at the same time, obviously, but neither one of them was he successful with. This is just one of many instances in which the speaker of the poem seeks to create order in randomness and the arbitrariness of nature. The fact that the speaker quantifies his impression of the birds reveals a process by which all observation is necessarily interpretation and characterizes the speaker as someone who seeks patterns and regularity. So we've gone over what autumn represents, and we've looked at what the dry paths could refer to. There's a dryness, perhaps literally, as one gets older, but perhaps, this is when one starts to worry. Has one achieved what one wanted to achieve? Is one on track to achieve one's ambition or leave one's mark? Okay, so if you identify the mood by referring to the diction, obviously, the idea of autumn, we've spoken about this dryness in the paths. There's a still sky, there's a stillness to the day. And then this strange prime number of swans with no partner. Next, we have the 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw before I had well finished all suddenly mount and scatter wheeling in broken rings upon their clamorous rings. All right, so, swans mate for life. And so that we've pointed out how that means someone's missing a mate. And it might be the poet. He's identifying with that 59th swan who has no one. And there's like a sort of magical quality to the line. 19 autumns, it's been 19 years since he started counting these swans, since he's been going back to this place and counting them. He's not 19 years old. It's been 19 years since he's been going back there and trying to count these swans. And then there's a lot of circular movement, chaos and clamor. I can just imagine these swans, before I'd finished, all suddenly mount. They all suddenly come up together and they scatter. They decide to fly up. And as they fly up, they're wheeling in great broken wings. They're going round and round in the sky. And there's a clamorous noise as they do it. And so their wings are not noisy. There's a transferred epithet there where the noise, the clamorous, has been used to describe the wings instead of perhaps the noise that is coming from these swans as they clamor up. There's a noisiness as they mount up and go. All right, I have looked upon these brilliant creatures and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I hearing at twilight, the first time on this shore, the bell beat of their wings above my head, trod with a lighter tread. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams or climb the air, their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest wander where they will, attend upon them still. Okay, so some of the questions here identify the Synecdoche and his unambiguous feeling in this next stanza. So the author uses Synecdoche to imply that his sore heart, which is part of his body, represents him as a whole human being and his pain. I've looked upon these brilliant creatures and now my heart is sore. And so there's no doubt in his mind as to how he's feeling. All's changed since I hearing at twilight. Again, a reference not just to the time of day, but to perhaps his time in life. And now my heart is sore comes almost midway through the poem. It is the only point at which the poet declares his sadness unambiguously. The diction is clear here. He is sore, heart sore. Elsewhere, it is implied by metaphor and allusion. So we look at the diction carefully to decide how he's feeling. The short monosyllabic line is like a pivot around which the poem revolves. Yeats judges it perfectly. Declarations of deep personal grief must be given out sparingly to maximize impact. An example of less is more. Remember, we say that too often in your writing. Don't give us strings of adjectives. Less can be more. Choose your diction carefully. Choose a better noun or a better verb instead of overwriting. The full stop at the end of the second line of the stanza makes the reader pause on the word sore, a caesura that conveys loss. So there's this definite break, conveys loss. It adds weight to the poem and suggests exhaustion from life experiences. I've looked upon these brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I hearing at twilight the first time on the shore, the bell beat of their wings above my head, trod with a lighter tread. Okay, so trod with a lighter tread through what? Well, through life, I suppose. There's another famous Yeats poem where he talks about tread lightly, for you tread upon my dreams. And then the line before that, I just love it. I love this bell beat of the wings upon bell beat of the wings above my head. Again, you can just imagine the beat of the wings. Just try and hear that in your as you think about it, the bell beat. And of course, the repetition of the B is quite plosive and gives you the sense of the beating wings. Okay, so the notes over here, the idea of treading is used by Yeats in his poem Cloths of Heaven, where he says, I've spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. In both poems, he uses the idea of treading as a metaphor for facing or coping with the emotions of life. And then he says, unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams or climb the air. I love that. Don't you love that? Climb the air. You can just see the way their wings flap and they gain altitude. They get higher and higher as the wings flap, and it looks like they're climbing, like they can get a foothold or a handhold on fresh air. It's beautifully expressed. Their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest wander where they will, attend upon them still. So the words cold and companionable are an example of an oxymoron. Sometimes you might refer to someone as being cold, being unfriendly, cutting you off or shutting you out. And so putting cold and companionable, two words that in the same line with just next to each other, cold, companionable, and then you've got climb. So you've got alliteration, you've got C alliteration with these words following closely on each other's heels. And they're an oxymoron because you don't expect someone to be both cold and companionable. They're either one or the other. But you do sort of understand it too. The conditions of life perhaps can be cold. And one goes through these with other people, hopefully not alone. Knowing that they are monogamous, what is the message in this stanza? Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams or climb the air. Their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest wonder where they will, attend upon them still. Again, just referring to being together in the hardships of life, except for that poor 59th swan, shame. But now they drift on still water, mysterious, beautiful. Among the rushes will they build. By what lake's edge or pool? Delight men's eyes when they awake someday to find they've flown away. So the word still is quite deliberate. How does it change the pace? But now they drift upon the still water. And we've had this reference to the water before, haven't we? With the mirrored, the lake as a mirror. And the still water, we kind of pause there, don't we? The second line is musical, a juxtaposition of lyrical beauty, mysterious, beautiful. The diction tells us that. It's so obvious, isn't it? The swans have been there year after year, or at least descendants of the swans have, but one day they won't be there. Given the poet's subjective stance, in other words, These are his feelings on the page. Given this stance, could he have actually been referring to himself? And I feel like that's possible. He's returned year after year to see them. They represent a constant, at least to his sight, even if some have died and been replaced by others. But now suddenly they will leave as they go and migrate or leave this pond. But now note that they will leave when he awakes someday, perhaps implying that he won't wake at all, and that they will delight others, not the speaker. So one day he'll die and he won't be there to enjoy it. So among what rushes will they build by what lake's edge? Delight men's eyes when I awake someday to find they have flown away. But perhaps it's him. Perhaps he's the one who won't be there anymore because he'll have died. Quite melancholy, isn't it? So their departure seems to be governed by the speaker's subjectivity, his position, his viewing of these swans. And we're all obviously prone to subjective stances. We all live our lives and experience and see what we see and experience what we experience from our point of view. Given the constancy he has ascribed to the swans, we must believe that it is he who is going away, and given the momentum of his aging throughout the poem, his departure could mean his death. Okay, so I got a lot of these notes from a wonderful app called genius.com. I noticed a couple of typos. I'm sure you did too. I just ignored them. But please go ahead and find the app, or go online and find it, and you'll find some of their wonderful notes there. I hope you enjoyed the poem. There's some questions for you to engage with in your notebooks. And work through it and let me know if you have questions on this beautiful poem.